Clive, thanks for joining us for what is part two of our in-depth discussion on issues around e-cigarette regulation. Some background for our viewers. You are an internationally renowned expert on tobacco control, serving 6 years as the executive director of the high-profile public health organization Action on Smoking and Health, which is a leading group in the war against smoking in the UK. Clive, let's jump back into it. The big news in Europe, of course, is the looming May 20th deadline for when the new vaping regulations in the Tobacco Products Directive take effect. Walk us through that.
The mandatory things are sort of technical restrictions, like a restriction on the concentration of e-liquids to 20 milligrams per milliliter, restrictions on the size of containers and the size of tanks, which will make the products more inconvenient to use. In other words, they'll have to be refilled more often. There are technical specifications for refills. Any advertising that potentially crosses a border is banned, and that means TV, radio, internet, anything in a publication, anything that's not basically nailed to the ground is banned.
Clive, what's the worst of the new regulations in the TPD?
The big, heavy bureaucratic burden is a notification regime in which every country is doing it sort of slightly differently. They've got slightly different rules about what sort of evidence you have to provide and everything. So if you are genuinely a European supplier and you want to supply in 28 countries of the European Union, you have to notify every flavor and every strength combination of your product in 28 separate countries in up to 21 languages.
And from what I understand, Clive, many of those individual products subjected to the notification regime might be nearly identical products. So what's going to be the cost of all this?
The notification charges per unit, so that's per flavor and strength combination and brand, can be up to €4,000 in a single member state, much lower than that in the UK, but some of them are charging a lot of money. So huge amounts of bureaucracy which multiply up by the number of member states, the number of flavors, the number of strength combinations, and the number of brands will make this incredibly burdensome on the sector. And just the bureaucracy alone will take out the smaller players and the wide and highly diverse range of products that there are on the market, and will favor bigger players with a narrower range of high volume commodity products.
Clive, it sounds to me like big tobacco and its e-cigarette products would stand to gain the most in a post-TPD market.
Yeah, Brent, I totally agree. I mean, the problem, and I still don't think it's really sunk in Europe, the United States, or Canada for that matter, is that a lot of what is done to regulate e-cigarettes is in effect a de facto protection of the incumbent industry, which is the cigarette trade.
You say de facto protection. A lot of vapors out there would say it's a conspiracy to steer profits towards big tobacco.
Most of what looks like a conspiracy is just good old-fashioned incompetence and a failure to really understand what the consequences of regulation are. But if you were big tobacco, you could hardly design things better than we have on the way in Europe.
How do you mean?
If you were big tobacco, there are two things that help you. Very high regulatory barriers to entry at the firm and the product level. So that means that there aren't too many competitors and they're not too innovative. It slows the incursion of a disruptive technology into your core market. And then the second thing you might want, if you were big tobacco, is you would want the market for e-cigarettes to be rigged as possible, to the extent possible, in favor of your business model. And your business model is something that looks like selling cigarettes through bricks and mortar stores, high volume, low diversity, commoditized products that look a bit like cigarettes. That is pretty well what the regulation that we have does. That's where it takes you.
So Clive, no conspiracy theories then for you?
I am not one of the conspiracy theorists. Actually, here I think the tobacco companies actually have a better story to tell than that, which is that they see this as a route ultimately out of their pariah status. They ultimately, in the long term, think that a nicotine market that doesn't involve as much death and disease as they're in at the moment would be beneficial both to them and to the consumers, and I agree with that. So I don't think they are necessarily trying to get the narrowest possible advantage out of it. It's just that that seems to be what the public health lobby and the politicians are gifting them by these very aversive, very arbitrary and very heavy-duty forms of regulation that we're seeing coming in.
Now, I know, Clive, that for many vapers, it's very alarming to see government come in and take these steps. What's the message vapers want government to hear?
We've found the solution to our own problems. With innovators from China, from the US, from Europe, we have found it. It's been a consumer market-driven revolution. It's an insurgency against you and your ideas. You have not been asked for your approval. You've contributed nothing. No taxpayers have been harmed. No health resources, healthcare system resources have been called upon. It's a complete bottom-up insurgency between private sector innovators and consumers working it out for themselves. Would you please back off? And that's that, to be honest.
Well, it's where the deep wellspring of anger comes from.
And it's like they're coming along, they're seeing people, oh, well, we'll just put a limit on the strength of the liquids. Frankly, what do you know? Why are you putting a limit on this? You don't know the first thing that you're doing here. You're putting a limit on the size of the containers. All that does is inconvenience me. You're banning advertising. So all that does is stop other people out there who could benefit from what I'm doing. At every turn, they're seeing something good that's happened to them, something that's been a real personal voyage for them in many cases. And you see the testimonies are incredibly moving, Brent. I think anyone in public health should spend a bit of time looking at the testimonies. They say, why are you messing with this? What's your argument? They're open to it. If you think there's something good that could be done on a regulatory front, please do it. If there are rogue products, cowboys on the market, get rid of them. Things that could be done, for example, like dealing with battery safety, they're not actually bothering with that. So in areas where we would like regulation, we're not really seeing the regulators actually addressing meaningful problems. So to them, it just looks like a load of government and public health harassment, rather than something that's designed to improve the life and times and health and well-being of consumers.
Well, Clive, you certainly know how to paint a picture. Is there any room for sunshine in that frame?
I want to say that it's all totally, entirely negative, but it's definitely not an improvement on the status quo, either, especially in the short term, and particularly not in the long term.
So pull out your crystal ball then, Clive, and tell us, what do you see after the TPD goes into effect?
Short-term impacts will be a whole load of companies simply won't be able to cope with the regulatory burdens. They and their financiers will give up and they'll go out of the market. So we'll see consolidation at the company level. We'll see a much narrower range of products available. And we'll start to see vapers doing workarounds.
Finally, Clive, what about the long-term impact on the vaping industry in Europe?
We will see the industry somewhat bent out of shape, the pace of innovation declining. We'll see products that are designed to please regulators rather than customers. We will see the rate of uptake probably declining because the products won't be so appealing. It will lose its buzzy edge because it will look boring. The warnings will deter people from taking it on. It will be, it will not look as attractive and interesting as it is now.